Hello, I am Sharon Roberson Pender, and I'm President and CEO of the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council and the operator of the U.S. Department of Commerce Virginia MBDA Business Center, the first of its kind in the Commonwealth of Virginia. As an organization, the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council is one of 23 regional affiliates of the National Minority Supply Development Council, and our mission is to certify, connect, develop, and advocate for minority businesses. We are incredibly excited to bring you informative podcast discussions with some of our most respected and well known business leaders and entrepreneurs. We ask that you visit our website at www.crmsdc.org to stay up to date with our upcoming events. Today's episode, and I am so glad you decided to stop by and do this live with us. We have the unique pleasure and honor of speaking with and asking her to tell her story, and that is Mrs. Loida Lewis. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, but we certainly want you, if you have not purchased her book, I promise you, once we finish this conversation, it will be your next stop with Amazon or wherever you're going to buy your books. But before we get started, I don't even want to go down there because I'm just so excited. I need to thank the folks that make this happen for us. And that is Exelon, which with them is BGE and Exelon Company, Pepco and Exelon Company, Mass Mutual, Capital One, AMCUS, SBC, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Tidings. And this broadcast is being funded in part by the MBDA Business Center of Virginia. What I'd like to do right now is just to give you a little bit of background. Few decades ago, one of my predecessors, created the Reginald F. Lewis Lifetime Achievement Award. And for years, during our Leaders and Legends award celebration, we always presented that award to someone who was like-minded of the late Reginald Francis Lewis. And every year for years, and we did not do this during COVID, and we had our 50th anniversary last year, and so the national awards this year, and so we will resume. We presented this award, and always in the audience was Mrs. Carolyn Fugit, the mother of Reginald Lewis. And so we could not have this conversation today without saying thank you, and we love Mrs. Lewis, as well as, of course, the person she called Mom, Mrs. Carolyn Fugit. And in this picture, Eddie Brown received the Reginald F. Lewis Lifetime Achievement Award, and that was in 2019, right before the pandemic. And both the ladies were there to present him that award. But I used to have really sobering, kind of encouraging, wonderful conversations with Mrs. Fugit. She was always so very encouraging, and I loved her, and we loved her, and we certainly do miss her. And as we continue to fight the good fight, and with our struggle, she was a dynamite. We will miss her, but we will continue our legacy of presenting the Reginald F. Lewis Lifetime Achievement Award. So I wanted to share that with you, was on my mind and heart, and that we dedicate this conversation to her as well. But let me bring on the woman of the hour. And we're going to talk about her, so I don't want to read a bio, but what I will tell you is that Mrs. Lewis has served as chair and CEO of TLC Beatrice International, a $2.2 billion multinational food company with operations all across Europe from 1994 to 2007. She assumed leadership after the untimely death of her husband, Wall Street financier, and the first Black billion-dollar deal maker, Reginald F. Lewis. His memoir, or his autobiography, I know everybody has this on their shelf. I just took it off of mine. Why should white guys have all the fun? And it was how he created that created $1 billion business empire. Her memoir is Why Should Guys Have All the Fun? An Asian American story of love, marriage, motherhood, and running a $1 billion empire came out on March 28th and is ranked number one in Amazon's new releases for 8 weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Mrs. Loida Lewis. Hello, thank you so much for joining us and thank you for honoring us and having this conversation. How are you doing?
Very fine. And thank you. Thank you very much, President Pinter, for dedicating this show to my beloved Mrs. Carolyn Fugit. And I really want to call her my mother in love, not mother in law, because
Mm-hmm.
she was a beautiful, wonderful, feisty, wise, and formidable woman,
Very,
raising raising 6 kids with her husband Gene Fugit.
I
Yes,
know.
thank you,
How
and
awesome is
thank you for this honor of being with you and the Capital Region Minority Supplier Development Council. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And so, how long has this book been in the making? How long have you been thinking about it, and when did you decide to release it?
Well, thank you for showing my husband's book, Why Should Guys Have All the Fun, on
Right.
chapter 6 in his book.
Okay.
So I've been talking about him, and I'm so glad that many of your members have his book beside them because whenever I meet someone and said, "You're the wife of Reginald Lewis," I read his book and I changed my career. Or I read his book and I became an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very people are exciting. And in this book, I am one chapter, chapter 6. So after 25 years, when I turned 75, I said, I will have my book then. But I became 75 and 76 and 77 and 78 and 79. I'm turning 80. So I said, I have to write this book. So I called the co-writer of Mr. Lewis, Blair Walker. I said, Blair, you know half of my history. I want you to help me finish the other half. And that's why I have 18 chapters in my book. Why
Mm-hmm.
should guys have all the fun?
I know. I love that. But he has been an inspiration. In talking to some of my friends, I was talking to a friend of mine, Roscoe Williams in California, Bob, Bob here and Baltimore, and Taurus Richardson and others who have said, Bob Wallace is what I was trying to say, who have said that your husband has been the inspiration, and that his whole attitude about acquisitions is kind of what they've made their mantra. But I want to start because I want people to know your story, and I love your spirituality. When I look at the last page of your book, and you quote scriptures throughout your book, but I like how you ended it when you said, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek His will in all you do," and that is what reverberated. I'm sorry, for me throughout your book and the scriptures that you said. And one of the things that I'm jumping around, but I'm going to start back at the beginning, is that when you took over Beatrice, you wanted to start. I remember in the book you said you wanted to start with prayer, but what I did not see is how was that accepted.
I didn't care. I didn't care. I am CEO, and that is part of my daily routine.
Uh-huh.
So that's the best thing about being CEO and owning 51% because Mr. Lewis saw to it that I, together with my two daughters, Leslie and Christina, have comprises 51%.
I love
So
it. Yeah.
yes, so and this is something that I'd like women especially and men that you have to be true to yourself. And when you are true to yourself, nobody can argue against you.
Mm-hmm.
So take on, part of my daily routine is asking God for help. And so on the board of directors meeting, which is so important, why not call for God to give us wisdom? So I didn't care what they say. This is what it's going to be.
Ah, okay. Okay. So let's start from the beginning. born in the Philippines. Your father was an entrepreneur. Your mother was someone who spoke her mind. And so you were love filled home, hardworking folks. And I learned later that, and so your destiny had been predefined by God, but also by your father, and that he wanted you to be he wanted you to be a lawyer. And so, and then he also, wasn't it, there's a theater named after you in the Philippines, Loida Theater. And so you're also a gifted pianist. Um, and so, but in the beginning and growing up, why did your father predetermine that you were going to be an attorney?
Well, I there are two boys, two brothers in front of me,
Mm-hmm.
and sad to say, he is so strict on my two brothers. But I'm the first girl, and he's sort of like, as you can read in the book, he sort of like knew that the third child would be a girl. And because as I was growing up, he could see that I'm the more fearless, articulate, daring, ambitious. So of the five brothers and sister, I was the one whom he identified to follow his dream to become a lawyer to enter politics. So that's probably it. But the most important is that my father would be in Manila doing his business as owner of a furniture manufacturing company. Friday, he would come home, and after a sumptuous dinner on a Saturday night, we would be out on the balcony overlooking our town. And there he would start his value sharing, or if you would call it brainwashing. And he would always start with, what are the five secrets of success? So that's what I'd like to impart on those who are listening. While your children are growing up, give them the values, and you have to say it, because if you said it, they heard it. If you never heard it, if he never said it, you'll never hear it. So
Mm-hmm.
value of hard work, and he'll give example. The value of common sense, and he'll give example. The value of determination, and he would give example from his own life. The value of thrift, now it's called financial literacy. You must know how to handle money. You must know how to save or invest. And the last one is faith in God. So you see, I turned 80 last December, and I still know it,
Oh,
because every night, every week, what are the five secrets of success? And we don't have to say it, because he will say it himself.
and
So
it seems like you're right. That has carried you through. And by the way, you're a beautiful, almost 81. Beautiful. And so thank you for sharing that.
this is what 81 should look like. 80. I will be 81 in December.
December,
I turned
right?
80 in December, and this is what 80 should look like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so in the book, it talks about that as what you were doing. You had graduated top of your law school class, and you and your mother came to the U.S. as a reward for your hard work to wait for your sister to graduate from Columbia. And while you're there, um, you decide to get a job while you're waiting for her, correct? And
Yes.
that job kind of turned the course of your life. Can you talk about that and your sister and the blind date?
Okay, this is chapter 2 in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Here comes the Nicolases, because all three of us, my mother, my sister, and I, arrive in the United States. She is studying for her master's degree at Columbia. We arrive in September. She'll graduate in May. So, practical woman that I am, I said, what do I do? I don't want just watching Broadway shows and, doing shopping. So I said, I'll go to work. And Village Voice then was the underground newspaper, has a help wanted column that says administrative assistant needed by a law student, civil rights research council. Civil rights, I like that. So
Right.
in my application, I didn't say I was a lawyer because I'll be overqualified. So I was practical. I said law student. And I
Okay.
guess my boss was a graduate of Harvard Law School, Ray Glover. He took me in as soon as I start on Monday. And he was the one responsible for introducing me on a blind date to Reginald Lewis. Why? Because my sister is single. My boss, tall, dark, and handsome, is single. Why not introduce them to each other? And
What does your sister say about that now?
no, we're all on a lark. I mean, we're here for temporarily, so why not? And Mr. Glover, Ray Glover, was fast. On that weekend, they were going out on a date, and that Friday, that's when he told me, Loida, let's do a double date. I'll fix you a blind date, and that's when he called Reginald Lewis.
Oh, wow. And then you all went on the date, right?
Chapter 2. Read all
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. And then you all went on this date and he asked you out again, right? On a he called you up and said to go out on a Sunday or something, and you got dressed and it was cold and you went out and then you went back to his apartment.
Well, we come from a very conservative country.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, I was class valedictorian high school conducted by Benedictine nuns from Germany, German nuns, and then college, cum laude by Belgian nuns. So it's European education, but very conservative. I haven't even gone on date with a single man. And in my mind, I'd go back to the Philippines, fulfill my father's dream, become a politician, go all the way to become a senator. So the
Mm-hmm.
farthest from my mind is having a romantic interlude. So when I met Mr. Lewis and we went out on a second date, just him,
Mm-hmm.
and he asked me, "Would you like to see the brain watercolor of my friend from Denmark?" Who knew that if you
Mm-hmm.
agree to go to the apartment of a man, okay, to see his watercolor, that it is fun. I mean, I had no clue. So read all about it in chapter 3.
I know. And so I'm gonna skip forward a little bit because people have to read about it. But what I liked is at the end of what happens there, and people have to read to find out what happens. You write them a letter and say, "It's been nice." Basically, you say, "It's been nice meeting you, but I won't see you again."
But I will remember you with fond memories.
Yes, yes, I loved it, and mailed it to him. And then, okay, we're not going to give it all away, but he calls you, and then what happened?
I said, "Oh my God, he didn't receive my letter." Because it was fun being with him. I went out with him again, and we had a
Uh-huh.
nice time. And then he
Okay.
was bringing me back to the hotel. And before he opened the door. I said, I wrote you a letter. Yes, you did. What? You see my letter? I told you I don't want to see you again. Well, and this is the kicker. He is a lawyer. Well, Loida, I'll never do anything you don't want me to do. End of
And that
conversation.
that that really got you, right?
No, no, no. He's not a lawyer for nothing. But he knew, and I knew. That's right. He won't do it. It's with my consent. So
Yeah. So
hard.
let
He
so
he overcame that first no, because as you will read in the book, I said a second no to him in December because we
mhm,
were getting close. I knew that I will fall in love with him, and so he invited me around Christmas time at the Empire State Building with Count Basie. And so while
wow.
we were dancing, I told him, I don't think we should continue to see each other again.
Mhm.
And he said, What? Why not? I said, Because I'm going back to the Philippines. I'll break my heart. I'll break your heart. So better stop now. And then he said, How do you know? How do I know? Again, he broke through. How do you know that you're going
Mhm.
back to the Philippines? And so,
Mhm.
he was very smart in that sense.
So we're going to fast forward, and after you get married, okay, we won't tell people what happened on that plane, but you get married, and you get married in the Philippines, correct? And your family is openly accepting of him. Okay.
Yes, my father was orphaned when he was 12.
Mm,
And so in our growing up, he never said anything about, they are poor, don't go with them, or, physical appearance, or, the way they dressed. So in a way, I grew up thinking of everyone look like what Martin Luther said. Look into their character, and so there is no definition of, oh, you're overweight, or you're poor, or you're darker color, because we do have the Filipinos. I'm sorry to say, are has inherited the colonial mentality that white is good
Sure.
and dark is not good.
Sure.
So there is that kind, but we did not grow up that way. So
Mm-hmm.
when my father, because I'm straight, meaning to say I don't say something to my father and do something else.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came home and told my father and mother that I'm marrying, and because my mother knew him, and my mother approved of him, because Mr. Lewis was not flighty. I mean, he was serious. So my mother was very impressed. But my father never met him. So
Mm-hmm.
when I showed my father a picture of Mr. Lewis while we were in St. Thomas, with his bathing suit, he looked at this picture and he looked at me and he saw that his eldest daughter was in love. No objection.
Oh, okay. And so you have the wedding, you come back to New York, and he is at that point in time, he has his own law firm. Okay, and he's working that, and this law firm goes through this transition, but he always had an eye for doing business. He was on
Okay.
Wall Street, always wanted to do, and he had, people can read in his book as in terms of, along the way.
I
I'm sorry, you're
recommend
about to say.
I recommend to everyone to read his book, because, in short, what he said is, and this is his term paper where he got an honors grade at Harvard Law School.
Mm-hmm.
In order to create wealth, you must do merger and acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And he explains to me that statistics show that if you start your own business, you have a 90% failure rate. That's across the board.
Mm-hmm.
You have only a 10% of succeeding if you start your own business. But if you buy a business, it's already ready made. They have customers, they have suppliers, they have income, they the expenses. And so if you buy a business, your only goal is to increase income, reduce expenses, and make it profitable, and then have an exit strategy. So
Mm-hmm.
that is all in the book. So Mr. Lewis was a practicing lawyer. We were successful. We had a house in the Hamptons, a 3-bedroom house. He was driving a Mercedes. We had a brownstone in Manhattan. So all the trappings of success. But for him, the sky is the limit as an entrepreneur, as a businessman. But buy a business.
And that is such valuable information. And the folks I talked about earlier who said that, and many folks who have said that that is what symbolically they really appreciate watching that. And so, but I also know that there were, being rich wasn't automatic. There was a journey along the way. You had started out for yourself in terms of you were the first Asian American to get to pass the bar, and
Without
did that.
studying.
I'm
Without
sorry,
without studying in the United States.
right? Without going to law school here. That is just fantastic. And you decided you wanted to do, because you've always had that servant heart, and you wanted to do immigration law, and you did that for a while. And then talk about having to sue INS. Can you tell folks about that a little bit?
Yes. The reason I'm the first Asian is because before 1993, if you are a foreigner, you are not an American citizen, you cannot take the bar. In 1973, the United States Supreme Court ruled that citizenship, US citizenship, is not ingredient to being a good lawyer. Citizenship has nothing to do with it. And so I immediately filed to take the bar examination in New York. Why? Because I studied in the University of the Philippines College of Law. That was established by the America, because we were an American colony, in 1908. So all the laws that we were studying is copied after American laws, constitution, labor law, administrative law, insurance law, everything except criminal law, that's still copied after Spain, the Siete Partidas. and the civil law that's also copied after Spain. So America, as our colonizer, didn't disturb that. But everything else we study is copied after American laws. And therefore, the Bar Association in New York and some other, I'm not sure it's all over the United States, recognizes University of the Philippines College of Law is equal to an American law school. So
Mm-hmm.
when I applied, I was accepted. I studied like the Dickens, and I
Mm-hmm.
passed the first time.
Yes. Very, very good. So talk to us about being married, now having children, your beautiful daughters, and working, and then being married to someone that's kind of driven, two type A personalities. So talk about how that worked for you. How did you make that work?
Okay, because I hear my father and mother quarrel and shouting it at each other, in my mind, I will never, never be like that. So when we would quarrel, I would just keep my mouth shut. Okay, and slowly tears will come out of my eyes because I didn't want to have that tack, 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 tack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was the first. And what did Mr. Lewis say? I know what that silence is. That's aggressive silence. He knew. But then, during our early years, when he told me, Loida, you don't know where I live. Oh, wow, my God. I was so heartbroken because I
Mm-hmm.
consider myself very sensitive, compassionate, that I
And he
know.
was talking about being a black man in America.
He didn't say that. He just said, you don't know where I live. And
Mm.
so I had to look into myself. What does that mean? That means, yes, understanding that he is a black man, that he is out there fighting dragons and monsters.
Mm-hmm.
When he comes home, he doesn't want a dragon in the house. And
Mm-hmm.
so I understood that when he comes home late, I don't say, why are you late? I say,
Mm-hmm.
darling, have you eaten? Darling, do you want a massage? B, I was the oasis for him to come home. That's
Mm-hmm.
one. The second one is, as a black man, he will be, what they call it now, insulted,
Mm-hmm.
patronized, and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So when he comes home and he says, oh, I said something wrong to, I don't have to say, that was stupid. Why would you say that? Instead of that, you just say, I say, oh, that's correct. He deserved it. Whatever you told him, you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
Support him, bring him up. And then, and he failed 3 times. 3 times he wanted to buy a business and he failed not once, not twice. Third time, he almost had a nervous breakdown. And so for me, it's always, you know, giving him positive reinforcement. One
Mm-hmm.
time he was talking about, his business. I mean, he was making a deal, a call pattern company, and he was just spewing out anger that this and that and this and that and that. And then I said, it's okay, darling, don't worry. And then he shouted at me, what do you know about the deal business? And I said, I don't know, but I know you can do it. So this is for all of us, man or woman. You have a partner, if he or she is very ambitious, support.
Yes.
Don't be negative. Just be
Mm-hmm.
positive. Because positive adds. Like 1 + 1 = 2. It's in arithmetic. 1 - 1 is 0. Why would you be the 0 in a relationship? And
Right.
again, just for those who are in a married or in a relationship, all right, you are a team. You are not going to fight each other as opponents. You're committed to each other. You're a team. You must have an understanding of the basics of a relationship, you know, fidelity, that she's the only one or he is the only one. You must have an understanding of faith. Will you be, will you remain in your religion or in his religion? Or if he doesn't care, then you continue. Children, how do you raise your children? And financial, all of those four things, you must have an agreement. All the rest can go.
Yeah. Wow. So once he scored big, I remember your mother-in-law telling me that he called her up one night because I get the impression he called her a lot. And he called her up one day and said, what do you know about sewing patterns? And that was before he made the acquisition to a call. She shared that with me. But when he brought in the big one, Beatrice Foods, what was that like at home for you? I mean, that just had to be euphoric.
Yes, yes. But I never doubted. I never
Mhm.
doubted. It is big. He bought McCall Pattern Company for 22 million, all borrowed money. Sold
Uh,
it for 65 million plus a refinancing of 18 million plus a salary of a million each year. So the total return for McCall was 90 to 1, meaning 1 million cash got 90 million back.
and that's the leverage buyout. What?
That's
How
that,
old
that
at that point? How old
he,
is he?
he was 44.
Wow.
Macron was 44, 45,
Wow.
46, 47. No, no, wait. He got it. He sold it in 44. 45, he bought Beatrice 1 billion. So can you see that, he sold
Hmm.
it for 65 million and then bought a $1 billion company. Leverage buyout was very prevalent then. And he became friendly with Drexel Burnham Lambert, headed by Mike Milken.
Michael. Yeah,
And
Mike Milken.
Mike Milken saw in him when he said, "Be my investment banker to help me buy Beatrice." Saw in him and his business plan made so much sense. And
Hmm.
so Mike Milken is a businessman also. So he backed him and he bought for $1 billion. And how much money did he put in it? 15 million. Can you
Of
see
his
that
own of
leverage?
his own
Everything
money.
else is
Yep.
borrowed.
Hmm.
Everything else is borrowed. You cook it with its own lard. So
I like that. Cook it with its own lard. Love
yeah,
that.
that's what you do when you buy a business.
And so your daughters have gone to Harvard.
Both of
Um,
them,
both
both
of
of
them.
them
I know.
graduated cum laude.
Oh, I know you're very proud of that. And so then once Beatrice happened, the operations are all in Europe. You guys moved to Paris, and you learn to speak French, and you because it seems like Mr. Lewis's goal was to that one percenter, for you all to be that in that category of one percenter. And so living in France, how was that? How were you then received versus being in the US?
France has less racism. I mean, you know, there's still racism. There's still incipient racism. But because France had a French Revolution, égalité, fraternité, and I can't remember the third one, equality, brotherhood, and democracy, or liberty, that's the third. So there is another kind of mentality, mindset among the French. So he felt so comfortable. He loved Paris. Besides, his grandfather fought in World War I and was assigned in France. So he heard all of the stories. So that was wonderful. That was wonderful. He would, yes, it was our best years in our marriage.
Hmm. And so you had, you were as one percenters at that point. There was the private jet. There was um, the home in Paris, the home in the Hamptons, and the one that burnt down. That seemed like a very tragic story, but the recovery of that in terms of where you all then decided to live, and again, you have to read the story to understand what happened. There was absolutely wonderful. Um,
May I just say, when you say one
mhm,
percenter, it's not so much that. Yes, of course, his according to his aunt, uh, his goal was to be the richest black man in America. But
mm,
but what really impels him is to show the world, to show America that race should not be an hindrance to going to the very top, so that he want to disprove the lie that just because you're African American, you're black, you cannot go all the way up. That's what he wanted, to disprove the lie that a person of color cannot be as wealthy as anybody else.
and he
And that,
certainly did that, didn't he? When you
yes,
think about it, I'm from Baltimore. I knew exactly where he grew up, right? In terms of um, um, in West Baltimore. And he went to HBCU, Virginia State, and then was accepted in Harvard. And so he certainly did prove that, didn't he? And continues to prove it even 30 years later after his death.
Yes. One thing
So,
though, I want to emphasize,
mhm.
they were, they could not afford to go to send children to college. So in his mind, he's going to do it himself by being an excellent athlete. So
Mm.
he was accepted on a scholarship because he was the, what do you call it now, um, in football.
He was, yeah. What position he played?
Yes. Uh, when you are the captain, it's in football. It's not
He played quarter. Was he
quarterback.
quarterback? Mm-hmm.
100%, but he's hurt his shoulder, and so he did not continue the scholarship. So he shifted to um, uh, doing business while he was a college student. So what he did was because you have a chance of deciding what courses you take. So he said Monday, Wednesday, Thursday going to school. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday he went and out to work as an assistant to a photographer, getting sales from high school, elementary school, getting pictures, and the photographer with pictures and selling. So what I'm saying to all of those, you always set a goal. And for him, the goal is to finish college in 4 years on his own because he didn't want to ask, scholarship money, I mean, tuition money from his parents, who he
Mm-hmm.
had five other brothers and sisters, all
Mm-hmm.
going to parochial schools. So that is a lesson. Take care of yourself, work hard, and set your goal. And he did it. He finished Virginia State in 4 years. And I have to say this, 1965, the height of the civil rights movement,
Mm-hmm.
and Mr. Lewis saw that Harvard Law School was inviting the top 5 students of historically black colleges and universities. And so he said, I will go to Harvard Law School. Although technically he was not eligible because he was already a senior. But he was so determined to be there, he hounded the professor who was going to put on his name every day. So he was number 5. And that's what he went to Harvard Law School. And guess what? After 8 weeks, fully sponsored by Rockefeller Foundation, the professor who was watching this 8 weeks of performance told Mr. Lewis, Reg, if you want to be in the class of 1968, you are admitted. He was
Wow.
admitted before he even applied.
And it's 1968. So let's talk about what's happening in the country. It's
Martin
the
Luther King.
yeah, it's the civil rights
Assassinated.
piece. It's civil unrest. It's all of that. And wow, what an incredible story. This has got to be a movie. It has to be a movie. So,
Well, I must say, this one has been optioned by Macro Production, the one who did Judas and the Black Messiah, the
okay.
one who did Just Mercy by Stevenson. So
Mhm.
it's in development.
But
So
I think this needs to be a movie. But
Who's part two? Why should guys of all the fun? An Asian American story of love,
I know.
marriage,
But you're so
motherhood, and
honest. You're
running
so
a business.
honest and open in this book. And so, thank you for doing that. And so I want to, I don't want to run out of time, but it's just so much. I really wish this was a 3-part series, but I know that we can't. So let's move forward in terms of um, what happens to your husband. Your daughters are growing up. Oh, before I do that, the part I love too. I want to go back to the business piece, but tell the story, this piece around how your girls end up in Jack and Jill.
All right. The family of Mr. Lewis are all in Baltimore. They are in private school where they are probably the only one black student. So I didn't want them to have, you know, yes, they have friends, classmates, but I want them to have that feeling of you are not the only one who can go on
Mhm.
vacation to, skiing and Caribbean, etc. So that's Jack and Jill. And I read in the New York Times that there is a Jack and Jill composed of, for black mothers for their children. And so in the newspaper, I called up. At that time, you can still call 411. And I spoke to Jack and Jill president, Ardis Hill. And of course, I went. She said, "It's over today. This year, you can't do it because admission is over. Next year, if you want to come, if you want to apply, yes, apply. But we have a fundraising in Al Naving. Okay, if you want to come, sure, whatever it is, I'll be there."
Mm-hmm.
So the next year, she presented me to the board of directors, and there were some people who said, "Mm-mm, she's not black."
She's not
And
black.
Ivy
Yeah.
Hill, to her credit, said her children are African American,
Mm-hmm.
and Jack and Jill are for our children. And so I got in. I integrated Jack and Jill Metropolitan.
And then gave the best party that they'd ever seen. Okay, I just had to get that part in. So let's fast forward to Beatrice is underway. You moved to Paris because your operations are in Europe and Spain and other places. People may not know Beatrice was kind of like the creator of Equal, and so Splendid. It's ice cream. It's all those kinds of things, and so it made sense for your operation for you to live in Europe at the time, and Paris at the time. And so, what happened? Can you talk about? So now your wife, mother, at this point in time, you have decided not to continue to work, but the competitive spirit in you, you always wanted to add value to your family, not only in terms of the structure of your marriage, but in terms of your contributions. And so you got into real estate when you were in New York and did quite well there. And you dabbled in a few things and you wanted to do it independent of your husband because you knew what your net worth was about and what you could do as well.
Can I just say something about that? Because, yes, I have a hardworking, ambitious husband. So, attending to him. Two girls who were school age, attending to them. My job, as I said, I integrated immigration and naturalization. Sir. This is before Mr. Lewis bought McCall. All right. And then I also bought real estate. I was crazy. And this is what I want to tell based on my experience. Girls, women, you can do it all, but not at the same time. Because what
Mm,
happened to me? My body revolted.
right.
I got TB. I got tuberculosis. And I had to stay at home for 3 months to totally heal. Because every time I'm a little better, I'd go back to work, bang, fever, and all that. So
Hmm.
that is a lesson I want those
That
who
we don't necessarily have to be super women.
you cannot do it all. You have to make
Hmm.
selections. Sometimes your selection is your career and you have no understanding between your husband, so divorce. Is that what you want? Sometimes you wanted this and forget the children. So your children grow up not knowing who they are. That's not good. So I saw to it that my two daughters know we raised them African Americans. Yes, their mother is Asian, but they are African Americans. Because in the United States, you are not considered whatever nationality as long as you have African American in your lineage, you're black. So we raise them to be proud as African Americans.
That's
So that's my
wonderful.
advice.
I know I don't want to run out of time, but I need to cover these two areas. I'd like to cover, and I told you as I read the book and I read what happened with your husband in terms of him being diagnosed, and I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about you taking over the company and what you had to do in 1993 because of what was going on in the marketplace. But first, can we talk about his illness and his, uh, yeah.
When he realized that there is something wrong, that when entering the car, he would bump his head, and that somehow his left side was, when you go, yeah, his left side was getting weak. So at the end, he went to for a biopsy, and it came back December 31. and he had brain cancer. So he asked the doctor, what can cure it? It's incurable. So we started looking at alternative medicine. And you have to read the foreword, what I did,
Yes.
by, telling him there's faith healer in the Philippines. They cure impossible diseases. Well, you will see it did not work. So we
Mm-hmm.
went to Canada and did the alternative medicine of massive doses of
The
vitamin,
vitamin C.
and it did not work. And so in 19 days, Mr. Lewis was gone. And as you have known, President Pinder, Sharon, to have something like that so suddenly when you are supposed to grow old together,
Mm-hmm.
not to enjoy your grandchildren together, and to have that right there, it's so, so devastating. And I was totally out of sort. I could not say the Our Father. I could not say Thy will be done.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how that is. And so I was totally like out, you know, I was depressed. I was not
In
there.
shock. Mm-hmm.
I was not there.
Mm-hmm.
But I am thankful to my faith, to my belief in a loving God, that He will not leave me orphan, that He will hold me in the palm of His hand. So that's what strengthened me. That was strengthened me. And so when I started to say, all right, you know, be with me. And
Mm-hmm.
so my mind started to think straight. First, my two girls, I will be mother and father to them. So I did not miss any of the basketball games of Christina. Um, uh, Dream Girls, where Leslie was one of the actresses. I mean, I went to Harvard. I went to all, I mean, I did not miss any of those. Of course, my daughter says, Mom, what do you mean? I raised myself. She raised herself because I was running to Europe. No,
Mm-hmm.
that's fun. The girls. The book. Why should guys have all the fun? Mr. Lewis was writing it because I was writing my own book, How to Get a Green Card. And he said, I'm jealous. I said, darling, you have your own story. That's why he started writing it. And I found Blair Walker to finish the book. And then number three, he worked for, he wanted Beatrice, and it's not finished. He wanted either to go public or to sell it. So
Mm.
1993, going to 1994, it rained in Spain and Germany and France and Italy and Canary Islands and in North Country, Norway. And 50% of our business is ice cream. So
Mm-hmm.
our expenses remained the same, but the income went down. When I, okay, so all of that together. So it needs a very good CEO who knows what he's doing. And we started, my brother, Gene Fugit, Mr. Lewis' younger brother, was CEO because Mr. Lewis said, okay, if anything happens to me, you'll take over. But instructed him, find a real CEO. So we started interviewing. All of them were white. One was Puerto Rican. I have nothing against that. But no one says, I will make it successful. So if it fails, why did you? What happened? So I said to myself after prayer, very clear, take responsibility, pay your way, Loida. Do it because if it fails, you have nobody to blame but yourself.
Mm.
And if succeed, it's because I was able to find the right people to help me. And that's why I decided I'll go. I will take over as chair and CEO.
You know, there's a chapter in the book once you took over. Um, Puts and calls. Can you explain to our audience what that means? And I you very you took it over when you walked in. This is after your husband had passed away. The economy just kind of like recession in Europe. The bottom fell out. and it was at the most troubled time ever. And you had to go in and make some hard decisions. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, the very first one was liquidity. We had no money to pay our corporate staff. And so I had to ask them, so what do you suggest? Well, your ice cream business in Ireland has a lot of cash because they want to buy land. The factory was right in Dublin. And if anything happens, the population. So what do we do? Borrow from the bank in Ireland to have our liquidity crisis. And so they themselves know what to do. And as CEO, it's not like, oh, I know everything. You don't know. So you ask. So I asked that. Number two. So we borrowed. Number two. Our expenses were very high. What was that? The airplane. 3 million a year. We don't need an airplane. Down. Sold. Number three. We had full staff. But because the company was smaller, I had to shed off staff. But I gave them very good separation salary. So from a minus in the red of 22 million when Mr. Lewis died, 1994, we had an net income of 1 million, and then 4 million, and then 9 million the next year, and then 15 million the next year because I started to liquidate the company. Why liquidate? Nobody wants to buy a company that has ice cream here, supermarket there, and things like that. Okay, now why did I decide to liquidate? Because of the put and call. When Mr. Lewis bought the company in 1987, there was a leader price that was being started by our partner in France from PRI, the Beau family, BAUD, Beau family. And by the time I came in the fifth year, it was growing by leaps and bounds. It started in 87, 88, 89, 90. No, wait. 87, 88, 89, 89, 93. When he died in 5 years, it was enormous. But it was an agreement with Mr. Lewis that in 7 years, he can tell the owner, I'll buy you 100%.
Mm-hmm.
What's the price? The price is 15 times their net income. EBITDA, it's called, the cash flow. But they themselves, in 7 years, can say, buy us out. You can become 100%, but we'll buy you out for multiple of income. And so by 1995, my CFO, Peter Offerman, told me, Loida, don't wait until that 1997 because every year it's growing by leaps and bounds. The income is going to be enormous and multiple of 13 or multiple of 15, it's like 100 million financial obligation. We have to sell it. And that's what put and call is. Exit the supermarket business from pre and leader price. And by that time, out of 2.2 billion revenue, it went down to 350 million because that was the heart and core of TLC Beatrice International.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and from that time on, slowly sell it. Lewis borrowed $1 billion in debt. He paid 50%. By the time I took over, there was 350 million leverage buyout debt. And by the time I sold the supermarket, we had paid zero debt. We paid all the debt and we had plenty of cash. And so to distribute the cash as a dividend, Uncle Sam is going to get 40%. High net worth individual, you get 40%. The Uncle Sam wants 40%. So it is very inefficient. But if you liquidate the company, if you sell the company, then the shareholders will have to pay capital gains, and that's only 20%. So it was, logical. Sell the entire company, liquidate it, and that's what happened. I got 1 billion back.
That is remarkable because again, read the book because there were challenges along the way. When you and I believe because you're a woman that they wanted to push back on you on some of that thing. They tried to. They didn't know who they were dealing with, and you were able to and remind them, I own 51%. I loved it.
No, no.
So,
Here's another lesson.
mhm,
Avoid litigation
mhm,
because our shareholders, the Drexel partners, including Mike Milken, was 25% owner, minority. And they wanted me first initially to get all the ice cream business. I said, no, we're in together, we're out together. And so they said, we'll sue you. All right, sue me. We'll fight you to the death. But the litigation is so expensive. It takes time from us as executive, and it's taking money from the company, you
right.
know. So in the end, I settled. Whatever it was. Read it in my book. I
Mhm.
settled so that we can continue to make the company, to increase the value of the company. And after 7 years, in 2002, we settled. We were ready to distribute capital gains, and they said my return was 35% internal rate of return, meaning to say every year, if you put $1, it increased by 35%, 35%. And it took from 1987 to 2002. It took a long time, but
Mhm.
some of my shareholders were so happy they sent us a bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon.
And that champagne was your husband's favorite drink.
His favorite thing. Yes. French champagne.
Right, right, right. Um, so as we kind of bring to closure, I have enjoyed this conversation. I know that now that you do a lot. You're very generous in terms of the work that you're doing with the foundation, the contributions you've made to Harvard, and what's we actually my organization is working with the Reginald Lewis or business
Museum.
school. Well, I do that too, but the business school at
Virginia
Virginia
State.
State.
It was
We do
named
that.
after Reginald.
Yeah, we do that. We just finished a Minority Business Academy there in conjunction with them,
Yes.
and so of course the Reginald F. Lewis Museum in Baltimore, um,
Yes.
and
Thank
so
you.
you continue to do all of those things.
Yes.
So what's
President Winder, I just
Mhm.
want to give a shout out to Governor Westmore
Mm,
because I had a book launch at the museum, and
okay.
he helped. He introduced me. He introduced the book and had high praise for what the Lewis family are doing.
Okay.
I
And
want to.
which is a lot. So that continues to be a lot. What's next for you?
Well, I'm planning, because every time I speak to, audiences, basically the lowest hanging fruit, because I've been president and one of the founders of the National Federation of Filipino American Associations, NAFA. So they say, come here, come here, come here. So I've been
Mhm.
doing world tour, and many of them are suggesting, we need to hear more of you. Why don't you do a podcast? So what's the next? A podcast, and maybe another book. Another book,
Okay.
How to Look Young Without Botox.
I love it. I love it.
That's
Listen,
one chapter.
yeah. It looks like we have some questions. Do you mind if we just a few minutes for questions?
Please
Okay,
fire
great.
away.
Sonia?
Yes. Hello, Mrs. Lewis, and thank you, President Pender, for an amazing conversation. We've had some great engagement in the chat, and we did have a question that's somewhat of a two-parter. Someone in our audience has asked, we're made up of minority and women-owned businesses. What lessons have you learned on your journey to success that you would like to share? And specifically in the book, you shared that Mr. Lewis always said, the goal is to create wealth, not build an empire. Can you expand on that?
Yes. Basically, when you have a business, you must plan an exit, because sometimes you have an unrealistic dream. So my children can take it over when I'm ready to retire. Your children may not want it. All right. So if they don't want it, don't force it on them. Have an exit strategy. But at the beginning, you have a business, your goal, always have your business plan for that year. And every month, see to it that you are getting there. Number two, code of ethics. You have to obey, you know, very simple. Golden rule, don't do to others, no cheating, no lying, but be a good businessman, know how to make profit, but don't cross the law. Pay your income tax. Okay. And then the third one is determination, because as a business owner, there will be other people who will say, no, you can't do it, and things like that. So just think, be very clear, one step in front of the other. Goal, obedience, the code of ethics, determination. And in the end, that spells God, God. Because in the end, you ask God for everything. You say, God, please do this. The whole day you're doing your best. And when you go to bed, thank you, Lord. Now it's in your hands. So you'll get wisdom. That's my advice.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Lewis. We also had another question that came in. It talks about your relationship with Mrs. Fugit, the late Mrs. Fugit, and how she supported you and Mr. Lewis during your journey. How did she impact your life?
Oh, very much. I cannot tell problems to my own mother because she's not here. She's Filipina. But Mrs. Fugit has always been so supportive. I just love her. And she died last February. But she lives in my heart because she was always there. But it was hard going, living with Mr. Lewis. So I always enjoyed what she told me the first time during our first year. Loida, if you're that angry, go to the bathroom, spit on it, flush it. You'll feel better. That was so practical. And I did feel better. And she would always be, always affirming me. And then, just trying to make me understand, about Mr. Lewis. So she will always be my mom. I never want to call her mother-in-law. She was my mother-in-law.
Right. Thank you, Mrs. Lewis. I'll turn it back over to you, Sharon.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much. And thank you all who tuned in to hear this conversation. The other thing that I love about the book is your reference to your husband was like, my man, my beloved. I love that.
My beloved, darling, my darling.
Yes.
Yes.
So I've enjoyed this conversation and certainly appreciate, I know how busy you are, that you're taking the time to share with us your journey, this part and this part of your journey as you continue, and for sharing just that awesome, incredibly telling book. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Sonia, thank you. Is it Dwayne? Thank you. And my own assistant, Laura, and Lily Black, and Carissa Villacorta. And all my friends and my family in Baltimore. Love you.
That's right. In fact, your son-in-law is one of our certified minority. I'm not your brother-in-law is one of our certified minority businesses. Elliot
Wiley. Yes, yes, very successful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you,
President Pinder. Thank you. And to all of you, just keep going, as Mr. Lewis said. Just keep going.
Keep going.
No matter what, keep going.
Yes.
And my own, may I give my own?
Absolutely.
Everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end.
Say that one more time.
Everything will be all right in the end. If it is not all right, it's not the end.
And yes, I love that. Yes. What a way to end this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. What an amazing guest. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. But before we go, I'd like to acknowledge our corporate sponsors who continue to support our mission. And if you can see the screen, if not, if you're just listening in, AARP, Bank of America, Amazon, AT&T, BAE Systems, BWI, Thurgood Marshall International Airport, Booz Allen Hamilton, Cigna, Corvius, Dominion Energy, the Ellison Group, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Financial Realty Services, the Hilton, Horseshoe Casino, Huntington Ingalls, Leidos, Lockheed Martin, M&T Bank, McCormick, Montage Marketing Group, Monumental Sports and Entertainment, Northrop Grumman, Parsons, Peapod Digital Labs, Proven Management, Sage Services Group, SAIC, Sodexo, T. Rowe Price, Truist, United States Postal Service, Washington Gas, WSSC Water, Metro, Zillion Technology, and Zones. Now, for the first time in its 51-year history, the National Minority Supply Development Council National Conference and Exchange will be in Baltimore. First time ever. We are the host council. Baltimore, October 22nd to the 25th. You may visit our website for more information. That's www.crmscc.org. If you want to, please, we're looking for volunteers. If you want to sponsor, if you need exhibit booth, but don't forget to follow us, like, and share this episode on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. At CRMSDC is our moniker. Subscribe to our channel on podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Before I close, let me extend a special welcome to our Coronavirus Response and Relief Center and our media production team. For your behind-the-scenes support in helping us make this happen, thank you, Sonia Bigelow-Smith, who is our executive producer, Nicole Moore, who is our production director, Renee Sanford, and of course, Graybo Solutions for making it all happen and sprinkling that Graybo magic dust. That's it until the next time. We have more interesting topics, and just stay tuned. Visit our website, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.